Hi everyone. So it's been a little while, but I wanted to post part 4 of a 5-part series for my top 5 creepiest wikis. And this one, as promised, is pretty graphic and horrifying, so I am going to put a warning with it that it's not for the faint of heart. In fact, it's really quite a terrible story, and I'm very disturbed reading it. I'm really surprised that it's not talked about more, because it was so graphic and so terrifying, and I'm having a hard time understanding why it didn't receive more attention. So with that being said, this is part 4 of 5 of my 5 creepiest wikis, and this is the killing of Tim McLean. It is known as the killing of Tim McLean, and it was a horrifying true event that happened on the evening of July 30th, 2008. Tim McLean, a Canadian man, was just 22 years old when he met with a horrifying fate. He was returning home after work riding the Greyhound Canada bus, traveling along the Trans-Canada Highway. He kept to himself and sat at the rear of the bus, drifting off to sleep on and off as his headphones drowned out the constant hum of the traveling bus and the chatter of the fellow passengers. At 6:55 p.m., a new passenger, 40-year-old Vince Lee, hopped aboard the Greyhound and sat near the front of the bus. The bus drove to a scheduled rest stop, and Lee decided at that time to move to the rear of the bus next to McLean. McLean acknowledged Lee, smiled, and fell asleep with his headphones on and his head resting against the window pane. Witnesses claimed that it was at this time that Lee withdrew a large knife and began stabbing McLean in the neck and chest. And the knife is described as not really a butcher knife, but a bigger knife, not necessarily a machete. A lot of people said it was like the knife used in Rambo. And I'm not trying to make light of something, but that's the only way that I can describe it. It's one of those kinds of knives. The passengers watched in horror as Lee decapitated him and held his severed head high in the air, displaying it to the passengers, who were fleeing the bus in terror. He severed other body parts as the passengers watched in horror and then began eating them. So not only is this a murder case, but he's also a cannibal. Around 8:30 p.m., police reports poured in about the incident, and by 9 o'clock, police were in a standoff with Lee, who was trapped on the bus. Lee tried to drive the bus away to escape, but the driver had engaged the emergency immobilizer system, which rendered the transport immobile, and a truck driver who witnessed the gruesome events had used a crowbar to lock Lee inside the bus. The police found Lee still on the bus, pacing back and forth with McLean's severed head in his hand. Passengers were huddled at the roadside, crying and vomiting from the traumatic events. Police and the Armed Tactical Unit observed Lee defiling the corpse. They watched him tearing off his flesh and eating it while he screamed, quote, "I have to stay on the bus forever," unquote. At 1:30 a.m. on the morning of July 31st, Lee broke a window to attempt escape. He was shot twice with a taser. In the back of the police cruiser, Lee was searched. The authorities were horrified to find the victim's ears, nose, and tongue inside Lee's pockets. Other parts of the victim's body were found in plastic bags that were still on the bus. However, they never recovered McLean's eyes and part of his heart, which were the parts that were presumably eaten by the killer. The witnesses all testified to hearing a blood-curdling scream and saw Lee stabbing McLean repeatedly with the large knife. 26-year-old Garnet Caton sat in the row ahead of Tim McLean and testified the following, quote, "I got sick after I saw the head thing. Some people were puking, some were crying, some were shocked. He just looked at us and dropped the head on the ground, totally calm. There was no rage or anything. He was like a robot stabbing the guy," unquote. Passenger Stephen Allison also testified that McLean saved everyone on the bus. He said that McLean fought Lee, allowing the other passengers to safely get off the bus. On March 5th, 2009, Vince Lee was remanded to a high-security mental health facility and was found to be not criminally responsible for the murder of Tim McLean. During the trial, Lee was overheard muttering the words, "Please kill me," over and over. Lee was released on May 8th, 2015. So, what a terrible story. He was just released, and what I don't understand is that people, I should say the government that released him, says that he shows little signs of repeat behavior, doing such a horrible and grotesque thing to another person because of his medicine. My question is, he's completely unsupervised at this point. He can take his medicine whenever he wants to, so what if he stops taking his medicine? What happens then? There's a lot of people who are very, very upset that he is walking free after just a few years spent in a mental institution. He didn't really do anything to pay for the horrible act that he committed. And I'm really surprised that this hasn't gained more attention. It was a really, really disturbing incident, and after reading about it, I'm really, really upset. I'm nervous, I feel disturbed, and I feel really sorry for McLean's family and friends, because they've never really got justice for what was done to Tim. In my research, I tried to learn as much about Tim McLean as I could. I won't talk much about Lee. He's detestable to me, and still alive, and free. But Tim McLean was what people say a very bubbly, happy guy. He was always willing to help friends and neighbors, and just an all-around good guy. What happened to him was really terrible. It seems to always happen to people who are really good. So let's just take a moment of silence. Just think, just to remember what happened to him, and hopefully there's not a repeat.